right, let's really dig into the politics of all this now. With us is Fox News contributor Mollie Hemingway. So ICE is becoming obviously a big flashpoint for the midterm elections. But listen to Al Hunt and James Carville on a podcast warning Democrats not to go down the abolish ICE road. Listen here.
I don't want any Democrats out there talking about abolishing ICE. You talk about reforming ICE. You talk about making ICE work. You don't, I mean, we should have learned that lesson last time. When you say abolishing ICE, you know what they're going to say? You want them pouring across the borders.
The left is universally wrong about everything. Some of these ICE agents are dedicated law enforcement professionals. I'll be the first to admit that.
Yet we have this hearing, this road hearing from House Democrats in St. Paul, where they're throwing all of the typical invectives and hyperbole about ICE out there for the public to consume.
Well, both parties can have this problem where they listen to a tiny part of their audience and they act accordingly. It's really important for Democrats to remember that President Trump ran on a campaign of repeatedly, openly, and loudly pledging to clean up the mess with the borders and immigration that had been brought around through his predecessor and actually several predecessors. And he won most of the votes in the popular vote. And so they would be very unwise to take something that was very popular with the president. And not to mention, we have laws on the books about immigration. We have laws on the books about our borders. And enforcing laws that were democratically passed and elected is probably not a winner for Democrats.
Yeah, you and I were talking about the flashbacks to 2016 that we've seen this past week, and the very nice, understanding pieces about ICE going out and doing exactly what they're doing now, and the decorum in the White House briefing room when Josh Earnest was asked about kids being terrified and shaking in fear when ICE came into their homes. And he's like, well, I'm going to leave law enforcement to law enforcement. There was no pushback. Nobody was screaming or tearing out their hair or anything like that. And then we have the DNC chairman, Ken Martin, who's comparing what ICE is doing in the Trump administration to the Iranian regime, which got ripped by the Wall Street Journal. Listen to what the editorial board said. Mr. Trump is many things, but he isn't at all like Iran's rulers, as Iranian protesters well know. They call his name and rename streets for him in the hope that the U.S. might help them. Mr. Martin might fruitfully ask what the protest leaders in Iran think about Barack Obama and Joe Biden, who sought to reward their rulers with money and recognition, and reflect on why that is. I mean, be careful who you draw comparisons to here. Well, yes, and this isn't just anybody. This is the DNC chair who's saying, well, we are just like Iran. You can't protest, while he's verbally or, putting out there his own protest of immigration laws and their enforcement. It is somewhat reminiscent of what happened with Democrats in 2020 following the killing of George Floyd, where they embraced a defund the police movement, an effort to fight law enforcement. There is a view among some people on the left that laws and policing and police enforcement are not legitimate and that they must be fought. This is in contradiction with rule of law and civil society. And so Democrats who are telling them to pump the brakes on this are just noting how that comes off to average Americans, which is, to understate wildly, it does not come off well. And there's even been a relatively significant change by Minneapolis's mayor, Jacob Frey. Remember last Wednesday, he was out there saying BS and get the F out of Minneapolis and all that. Well, now listen to what he's encouraging protesters to do. Listen here.
I'm calling for peace. Everybody has a role in achieving that peace. And we're going to try to do everything that we can to keep it.
So he's calling for peace now. But the reason why we see what we see from the federal law enforcement is because of what the Democratic and the leftist protesters have been doing since Donald Trump took office. And I would actually be careful even on Jacob Frey there. In that very same segment, you will see the police officer or chief who's behind him raise his eyebrows when he says, we need to confront these people in the streets. So Jacob Frey has been, just like Tim Walz, actually encouraging opposition to federal law enforcement and federal law officials, openly calling for opposition here in a way that most people would see as a call for, even up to and including insurrection. And so this is a very serious issue. It's one we've dealt with in the past before. In the South, we had governors and mayors who did not support laws against segregation, and they tried to fight the federal government on that. We've previously had court cases showing that when states want to do a better job with border enforcement, the federal government gets to weigh in and gets to actually be dominant there. There's a moment in that news conference as well where the police chief comes out and says the protesters are being violent and breaking the law. Somebody who posted that clip that I looked at said, look at Jacob Frey's eyes. It looks like they're trying to bore a hole in the guy as he was saying that. Mollie, it's always